Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 19 of the Revenants Gaming Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered commentary. This is Loghain F, alright, and we are going through the Chaos Shrine, continuing. We just won our rematch against the Earth Fiend Lich, which was pretty easy, so now we're going through, and if you didn't catch on from what I said in the last part, we are going to be fighting the other three fiends again. Yeah, because this version of the Chaos Shrine is in the past, because we're going back to defeat the villains, so they don't resurface, and the timeline we've been in for the whole game. So yeah, as you can see, once again, left it in the random encounters, but I did take out when I healed and restored the spell charges, because nobody wants to see that. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, not too much to say. We're at a point in leveling where we're just able to just mow through everything, no problem, and I really did make sure to max out the number of ethers that I got before entering the Chaos Shrine. What's amazing to me is that I got so high leveled that it just wasn't a problem, that I never had to use teleport, which, I mean, I thought about it, but if you did what I did and really set your mind to grinding, then teleport, it's nice to have, but it's not something you actively need. Alright, now we're fighting Marilith again. Oh yeah, and it should be noted that unlike their first encounters, the Kraken doesn't actually have it. The Kraken, which we'll get to soon, actually loses his weakness to electricity, which granted but thankfully Lich didn't lose his resistance. No, thankfully he didn't lose his oh man, I cannot talk to his weakness to the Tree. But yeah, so this is the point in the game where this is me going into critiquing mode, where the bosses all the bosses kind of reach up in the Chaos Shrine, reach a very repetitive point where the way you beat them is pretty much the same for each fight. So yeah, you're gonna notice that a lot of these fights, I use the exact same strategy, the exact same moveset, and they all pretty much end the same way. Yeah. Like that way being, temper and haste on the knight and the ninja, constantly using null whatever element the boss is attacking with, and then just devoting the rest of the time to healing and hitting the boss with flare from Carl the Black Mage. Yeah. Which was funny, is at the time of recording this, I actually talked to Carl earlier, and he said, why is my character so weak? And I'm like, it's the squishy wizard. What do you expect? The Black Mages have never been really, the Black Mages / Black Wizards have never really been known for taking a lot of damage and coming out, okay? Which, it's all about balancing. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point, but anyway. So, yeah. So yeah, as you can see, Marilith went down. Very easy fight. Yeah. Because, we have the class upgrades, and also we have all the necessary buffs. Okay. Now we move on. Yeah. Oh yeah, and as you can see, there'll be sudden breaks in the music because I do another thing I cut out, which saved me a lot of time, is how many times I looked at the map, because this is a pretty big dungeon. So yeah, And now we're in the segment of the dungeon where we're facing off against enemies that are water-based. Yeah. So yeah, and thankfully, Holy is a really solid white wizard attack, and Thundiga. I'm trying to remember, like, because I was at the time of recording, I did edit this recording yesterday. I'm not even sure if I'm not even sure if I even got to use Thundiga against these water enemies. Yeah, nothing in there. Because Holy was just so effective, because the spirit rating, which determines white magic effectiveness, was so high that the black wizard, excuse me, didn't really have much time to actually get in attacks. So yeah, again, just nice to have. It's funny, is when I fought the Kraken, I never even got to use electric attacks against him in the first fight, when it would have been super effective. But, you know, it's just not, as I said, it's just nice to have. So, yeah. So, yeah, this is the point where, yeah, and this part is, yeah, after this part, there will only be one more left, which... Thankfully, that part I don't actually have much editing to do at all. I think I'm just going to edit out most of the credits, just to get in our time limit. I think we're allowed 15 to 25 minutes. And also, I'm not sure how much I can actually carry on a conversation about the game for 20 minutes, because I feel like I've covered a lot of ground on what I think of this game, which, for those who haven't been following closely, again, the game was amazing for its time, but it is somewhat dated in a way. But yeah, I compare it to the original Legend of Zelda. It's an important piece of gaming history, but it's not. It's like, I replayed it. The only reasons I replayed it are, one, the first time for achievements, and the second time I replayed it was, well, for this commentary. Yeah. And again, this is the Kraken, which the Kraken will use electric attacks, so and physical attacks. So yeah, just buff the party accordingly. But yeah, and as I said, something that I'm surprised I didn't mention is one complaint I do have is, especially in this last dungeon, like, past a certain point, a lot of the bosses, you will just, even the super boss, which I didn't show off in this commentary, I really tried, I'm going to be completely honest, I really tried to trigger that encounter, but I just couldn't. Anyway, a lot of the bosses, I feel like, with only slight variations, they're too samey. Like, it's like you beat all the bosses with the same tactic, which my retread of Final Fantasy II, which, oh yeah, at the time of recording this, I have recorded the first two videos for Final Fantasy II, and it just doesn't, yeah, so I haven't gotten to any actual boss fights, so I can't really determine when. So it's hard for me to determine how the boss fights are necessarily handled. Although I will say, from what I remember, it does have more variety, because the party itself does rotate in that game. Anyway, so yeah. But yeah, just a lot of the boss fights in the original Final Fantasy, they just follow too similar a pattern, to the point where they just feel samey, and up until we get to the last fight, which is much more difficult than any other boss fight, and also like the fights with Lich, because no matter which time you fight Lich, the Dia tree will do the job. So yeah, and as you can see, we beat the Kraken. The fight was so insignificant that that I didn't have anything to say on it other than it uses electricity attacks. And just guard accordingly. Okay. So now we're going through the dungeon, and so now we're going through the rest of the dungeon where we're eventually, if you've been keeping up, we're going to be fighting Queen Tiamat. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah. I think that's how you pronounce it, so we're just going through. Yeah. And, yeah, as you can see, vampires just use the dia tree. Yeah. Diaja, yeah, that'll definitely do the job. Yeah. Anyway, so... Yeah. So, yeah, oh, Lord, cannot talk today. So the final dungeon, I like it in concept, but in practice, it can drag a bunch, which thankfully, because of how high leveled I was able to get through this part of the dungeon in 20 minutes. Like, it's amazing how much. So I ended up shaving off 5 minutes that were just dedicated to the map and going through the item screen. So, yeah. Yeah, I like this idea in theory, although given that we didn't get the ability to save in dungeons. Oh yeah, there's the final weapon for the ninja. Very, very handy. But given that we didn't get the ability to go through... Given that we didn't have the ability to save in dungeons until Final Fantasy IV, I frankly feel bad for people who played this game back in the 90s who didn't have the ability to save in dungeons. Like, you just go through the entire dungeon and you get to the final boss after going through this long dungeon, fighting the 4 fiends again, and the final boss just wrecks you. Which in that case, I can see the merit of the teleport spell. However, given that we have the quick save option, it's just not an issue. Kind of makes me feel like I'm cheating in a way, I'm not gonna lie, but you know, you make do with what you got. Like Final Fantasy 2, like if we're going by that dungeon, if you spec'd out correctly, that final dungeon is embarrassing. And yeah, so I might as well ask ahead of time for viewer input. There's a really cheap way to go through the last boss of Final Fantasy II involving a certain weapon. That last time I played ended the battle in 2 turns. So I guess I should ask, what do you guys think I should use that? Or do you think maybe I should make a separate recording of the fight? Or, I don't know. I'd love to hear the input of people who are watching and paying attention. But yeah. Because there's really no way to cheese your way out of these particular fights. So, yeah, it's weird. Final Fantasy II is both a lot harder than the original Final Fantasy, but it's also, there are certain ways that you can just cheese your way through things. So, I don't know. I guess it comes down to, do you guys think that cheesing my way through it would be beneficial to the commentary, or should I just showcase what the boss can do? I don't know. As I said, just let me know in the comments. I will probably ask this question again as I go through Final Fantasy II, which, again, at the time of recording, I've recorded 2 parts for. Gotta figure out how I'm gonna distribute that, because grinding in that game is actually a lot more important than grinding in this game, which I'll get to when I do. Oh yeah, so what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, another thing I was gonna address. So I've said in previous parts when I've recorded that I was gonna be the sole content contributor. Well, that was before Carl decided to do a playthrough for the PS4 Spider-Man game, like which, by the way, if you haven't played it, that's an amazing game. I also really recommend watching Carl's video if you want to see his take on it. So yeah. But yeah, so we're almost done with Tiamat. Just as easy as when we fought him fought her a few parts ago. So yeah, I'd hope that this fight isn't a struggle for y'all at this point. At least I'd hope. As I said, I do like this music, even though I wish there was a bit more variety in it. But, you know, we don't live in a perfect world. And thus falls the last of the fiends. Yeah, and so yeah, that takes care of the remaining fiends. Yes, because as I said, we're beating them in the past, so they don't wreak havoc in the future. And now we face the main threat. If y'all remember, as far back as the first part, this threat, and if I remember right, because this game, it's much harder to engage in the plot of this game because it's mostly told through NPCs that you don't actually need to talk to. But yeah, basically, yeah, the whole premise is the villain, to my recollection, just it just bends the fabric of time, and you have to go back into the past to beat. So anyway, thank you all for watching. In the next part, we will fight Garland again for the final time. This is Loghain F, signing off.